Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome back to the DMZ, everybody.
I think it's been a month, a little more than a month, trapped in this house. I don't know if you heard, Matt, but Massachusetts officially canceled the school year for the rest of the academic year. So we had to break that to the kids. My older daughter.
I'm sure it was tough.
You know, my older daughter, her birthday's in May, so she is upset that she won't have a normal birthday party. I mean, they're not itching to go back to school, but they don't like that they can't really leave the house much or see their friends.
This is like, to state the obvious, this is unnatural. And if you decided unilaterally, like let's say the coronavirus didn't happen, and you just decided that this is what you're going to do with your kids, you know, it would be child abuse. It would be like the trauma of saying
it's parent abuse. You know, what it is.
Well, parent abuse. Yeah, it's tough. It's you know what it's been very tough, but I will say this. I don't know if you probably don't know this about me. I originally went Shepherd College in West Virginia, now university, was originally a teacher's college. That's what they did. Mm-hmm. And I originally was an education major. I thought I was going to be a teacher.
Did not know that.
And then I worked at the Leadership Institute for 4 years, where I went around the country essentially teaching activists and candidates. So I love part of even my writing. I love teaching, and when there's parts of the homeschooling that obviously are tough on all of us, but when I'm actually teaching, like during the moments that I'm not figuring out how to logistically do it online, but when I'm actually teaching them stuff, I actually kind of like it. So, but I am blessed to have a job where I can, like, I'm not supposed to be 9 to 5 just doing something else. I don't know how I would do it if I was supposed to literally be doing something else 5 days a week, 9 to 5. And I'm sure a lot of Americans are in that predicament.
Yeah, I mean, it's a daunting prospect. This is going to go on for at least 2 more months for parents here and elsewhere. I don't know what's up with summer camps. Now, so not everybody sends their kid to summer camp, but I already laid out a good chunk of change for summer camps, and part of me wants them to go, and part of me wants my money back. So it depends.
Last year, my oldest boy, who's 9, went to a Christian camp really close to where I'm from in Western Maryland, and he was there for a week, and it was the most freedom he's ever had. Like, they sort of let him run a little bit loose. You know, it's your responsibility to show up at the right time, and you have some money. You can go to the little store and buy ice cream, you know, if you have enough money. So it gave him a taste of freedom. First time he was ever away from us, and he's really looking forward to that. And I don't know if it's going to happen, or even if I would want him to go. Because what we saw, and what Dr. Fauci said, this will come back in the fall.
Well, this is
despite what Donald Trump.
This is the most terrifying thing. Yeah. I mean, whatever point they are allowed to go somewhere, it's not going to be because it's over. It's going to be because we feel we can't do this forever. We're going to have to just do our best with the new knowledge that we have. I don't know if you saw the Times piece that published yesterday about the origin of the social distancing policy, how it came out of the Bush administration and the researchers that divided. They had to fight internally for it to be the official policy because, as you might expect, plenty of people inside the administration were like, that's nutballs. There is no way we're going to handle this by shutting down the entire economy. We're going to have to, trust that we can have the antivirals and develop the vaccine fast enough, yada, yada, yada. But there was research done showing that just shutting down the schools in and of themselves dramatically cut down the spread in their modeling. So
probably, I would say Probably because if the schools are shut down, mom and dad can't go to work either.
Right. I mean, that was definitely part of the pushback against the idea.
Shut down the schools, that forces a lot of moms and dads to have to, or one or the other, but probably both, to stay home from work.
Yeah,
to do the
I think that's probably part of it, but I think a lot of it is also just schools themselves are just germ incubators and spreaders, and adults work there, and they come back home to their parents and to their grandparents.
Yeah.
So it does concern me that when we go back and if opening up the schools is first or close to first, boom, you could just spread it all over again.
Totally.
So there's all sorts of anxiety awaiting
sort of
us.
Like all the work we've done is kind of out the window. Now, we did flatten the curve under that scenario. It's a little bit, right? But if your hope was, let's just ride it out till we get, a vaccine or something like that. I mean, so my concern would be, this starts to look good. Things start to, dissipate. The numbers are heading in the right direction. And then we send kids to summer camp. We open things up. And that's when they start spreading it. And then it comes back in the fall. Plus the regular flu. And so then you end up having, in September, October, November, even maybe potentially worse than what we have now. How does that impact the election? Is Donald Trump willing to shut down the economy again a month before the election this time? I doubt it.
I mean, there definitely seems to be a school of thought, largely on the right, that is fundamentally libertarian in its approach to this, that these things happen. You now know the things you should be doing to protect yourself, and it's on you to do them. And you can't expect the entire economy to shut down because we can't trust you to do the right things. And you certainly hear that in a lot of Trump's ramblings. It's not solely hitting that hard, but it's in the mix of what he's talking about.
Right, but we have a governor of Georgia who thinks, that Trump was critical of during the latest briefing. Trump criticized him for opening things like nail salons and tattoo parlors. Now, I guess you could argue that the tattoo parlors and the nail salons should be open, but people should be smart enough not to go there, right? Because obviously it's stupid. But there's a theory, and I mean, as much as I kind of hate to admit it, I think there's truth to it, that when something is legal, in a sense, it is the government endorsing it to a certain degree, right? Because the government wouldn't let us do it. So when the government says pot is illegal, there is a certain percentage of the population who don't do it because the government says it's illegal, right? Or it's like seatbelts, seatbelt laws, all those things. And I think this raises a very deep conversation, which is, I really believe, as much as I hate the nanny state, as much as I, very much fear that sort of paternalistic thing, I do think that the government has a responsibility to protect stupid people or vulnerable people, because being stupid is a vulnerability, I actually think.
Well, even to be
the government has a responsibility to keep people within reason from doing stupid things that will cause them to kill themselves or other people.
Well, to be a little less, a little more charitable, I mean, you can't trust kids not to spread. You can say adults, you know better, you know how to socially distance, you know how to wash your hands properly, but you can't trust your kids to do that stuff, especially when they're out of the house. They can't be watched 24/7. So you know there's going to be some spread on those grounds. You can do your darndest to wash your hands 100 times a day and wipe down your door handles and your cabinet doors and your fridge handles, but you are just in close quarters, and this may be aerosolized. You might be getting it through the air, so it's going to spread some. And I'm also hearing much more than I ever would have thought on the right. People saying, well, people die. People die all the time. People die from the flu. People die from car accidents. What are you going to do? It's the way of the world. I would not be surprised to see Trump try to muddle through the election saying, hey, look, people die all the time. Don't blame me.
Yeah. Well, because he plays both sides of this. I mean, he says things that are utterly contradictory. Sometimes he plays the sort of big brother, paternalistic, I have to protect you from yourself because it's all the experts say, whatever. And then sometimes he plays the card you're playing now. And then yesterday, as I said, he criticized the Georgia governor, Brian Kemp.
Now, how much is the Kemp? I'm curious, how much is the Kemp criticism his public health official saying, yeah, you can try to reopen when you're on the downside of the curve, but Georgia's not even on the downside of the curve. This is truly crazy town. And how much of it is, hey, Brian Kemp screwed me when he nominated Kelly Loeffler to fill the Senate seat when I wanted Doug Collins. I'm going to make him pay the price now.
So you're suggesting that Trump factors in personal vengeance into his public policy and health decisions?
It's a little out there for me to suggest it.
Are you saying there's gambling in Casablanca and at Rick's? I don't think so. We've sort of I touched on this, but since I did, we might as well kind of go there. So there was this piece, I guess, in the Washington Post where the CDC is warning that coronavirus is very likely to come back in the fall, and that because the regular flu will also be present, that it could be. Now, here's where we end up parsing words. I don't know the exact word that we use, but Donald Trump claims that Redfield?
Redfield, the head of the CDC.
The head was misquoted, and he called Redfield up to clarify, and Redfield basically said what I just said, which is not that he was misquoted, but there was some parsing over the language, and maybe you can clarify. But I think the main point I want to make is it is very clear to me that Donald Trump wants to downplay the potential, the likelihood that this is going to happen. He does not want to deal with the fact that this isn't. Trump wants to believe this is all just going to go away magically.
Well, I don't know that's quite where Trump's head is at, but it was weird in the briefing yesterday. I mean, we see this pattern where a public health official says a scientifically based comment and then gets brought out to give like a hostage statement at the press briefing. Yes. But doesn't disavow, but just tries to reframe and couch and spin. And the spin was, I said it was going to be difficult in the fall and the winter. I didn't say it was going to be worse. I said difficult. And all I'm really trying to say here is get your flu shot, kids. Get your flu shot, seniors. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm not saying the coronavirus itself is going to be a worse version of coronavirus than before, but we want to mitigate the spread of flu during that time. And the whole point is that, I mean, flu shots, I get my flu shot, you should get your flu shot. Flu shots are inherently imperfect because the flu is constantly mutating, and some years flu shots work better than others. Certainly the more people, so if you get an imperfect flu shot, it's better than not getting it all because it usually mitigates symptoms. Everybody should get one. But people still die.
I've been getting them for a decade, ever since we got pregnant, and me. But people since my wife I conceived, that's when I started getting flu shots. So it's been about a decade.
But people still get the flu, and flu still kills. some people are going to die of the flu no matter what, and it's an added pressure on the healthcare system during a period where there is a coronavirus that does not have a shot, that no shot will exist by then. So if you're Trump, so to your point, that Trump wants to say, I still think this is going to go away. I'm not sure if he is completely being oblivious to what's being told to him. Because the message from Dr. Redfield is, this is not going to go away. You will be dealing with this. I mean, I don't know if it's going to peak in November or December.
He may believe what Dr. Fauci is telling him, but what he's telling the public is there may be some, I think he used the word embers.
Yeah.
Embers of COVID or something, as if there's going to be like a light dusting of coronavirus.
Yes.
And he put Dr. Birx on the spot where she's up there, and he basically is like, please tell them this is not going to be a big deal. And she's like, coronavirus will come back, and it's very dangerous, but we will be better prepared to confront it because we have social distancing measures already in place. This won't surprise us. Well, I think I give her credit. She has to say what she has to say.
Sure.
And I'm totally down with that. But I'm not 100% convinced that it's this La La Land scenario.
I mean, Trump is not a long-range thinker. He plays for the news cycle. It's always whatever's going to work today, and he worries about tomorrow. So his game plan this whole time has been to make you feel better about today. And if that means telling you that tomorrow is not going to be so bad, that helps you win today. And every day is a constant dance of however bad it is, it's not because of me. The stuff that I did has helped. And if bad things happen, well, bad things happen in the world.
He focuses. There's an expression that life has to win every time, every day, and death only has to win once. Kind of goes to Dick Cheney's 1% theory, right?
Right.
Well, with Trump, he's focused. He's gotten two things apparently right? The China travel ban, I'll use the term ban loosely, and the ventilators. That's good. 2 things out of 100 maybe things that he really needs to get right. But in his mind, he just talks about we're the king of ventilators, and I'm the one who shut down China. He just focuses only on the 2 things that seemingly went well and not on everything else. And so he spends a lot of time on those, bragging about the couple things he seems to have gotten right.
Because that makes it seem like he did what he could. When that is...
And you know what the annoying thing is? I can just hear it. The voices of folks, the kinds of folks that I encounter at the local sheets, and they're saying, he shut down travel to China way before anybody thought it was smart. That was the whole thing. Nobody else would have, I can hear that.
Right.
And I can see them pulling the lever. So.
But now let's, to the question, is this working? Well, let's look at the polls. I mean, there was this brief moment in mid-March where it seemed like the briefing strategy was working. He got a bit of a poll bump. That is not sustained. His approval numbers have ticked back down. And his head-to-heads with Biden are not good. They're not good nationally. They're not good in swing states.
Consistently not good.
Yeah. Now, you could say they're not so bad that it's game over. You can't say it's game over. He's still competitive. It could, obviously things can go up and down, and things might look differently in November than today, even with what we're saying.
You know what I do, Bill? I give, maybe just for my own sanity, I give him 5 points. Whatever the poll says, I add 5 points to Trump.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
I'm not joking. I do. And some of it may be based on the fact that in the past, I think that they were sort of underpolling Trump supporters, or people were lying. They weren't willing to admit it. And some of it's just an extra cushion not to look stupid in 2020 when Trump wins re-election. But whatever the poll is, I assume 5 extra points. And even when you do that, Biden's still winning.
Well, yeah, in some of them, yeah. I mean, his national average lead is 6.
As I was saying.
But if it was actually 1 point, then you might say, well, that might be enough for Trump to win in the swing states.
Yeah.
But we are seeing certain swing state polls where Biden is doing better than 5 points. Not all of them. But he's still winning. I mean, he's winning almost every swing state poll that we see. And that includes Florida, that includes Michigan, that includes Pennsylvania, that includes Wisconsin, that includes Arizona. So if you were not to give Trump a 5-point handicap and you take the polls as they are, Biden wins very comfortably.
So I think it's safe to say, for now at least, I think it's safe to say that Biden's theory of don't try to be in every news cycle, don't try to have a shadow presidency, but stay relevant, stay in the game as much as you can. But basically, this is about. I think that strategy so far has really worked. Now, the dangerous thing, as you know, Bill, is the vice presidential, running mate selection. Mm-hmm. That is they got that, and then what do we do at the conventions? But the next one is who he picks as his running mate. And I think this is the area where he could mess up, right? If he's going to mess up, he could mess up here. Where are you at on that?
Well, I think it's going to be hard for him to really blow it. I don't think he's going to do a Quayle or a Palin. Remember, even Quayle wasn't so bad of a botch that Bush lost, even though I think it was a bad pick.
So Stacey Abrams, I don't think he's going to pick, but that's a Palin.
But I want to agree with you on that, but I want to make clear I don't think Abrams is a Palin because they're both out of their gourd. But Abrams would not meet a ready on day one threshold, even if she's a more competent public performer, reads the newspaper.
Sure. No, they're not. I mean, I'm not saying they're identical, but it would also be a pick based on political concerns over governing concerns, and it would be playing identity politics. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very much a Palin pick.
And I think Biden would not do that.
I'm also concerned about Whitmer. And it was I had Mike Murphy, on my podcast / Zoom conversation last week, and he's very high on Whitmer, the governor of Michigan. Something about it, man, scares me. I think it's got to be Amy or Kamala.
Now, did you see the poll yesterday about Whitmer?
I don't care what the poll says, but just for those who might not have seen it, what did it say?
So Fox polled Michigan yesterday. Biden leads Trump by 8 points in that poll. When you add Whitmer to the ticket, it's they say Biden, Whitmer, Trump, Pence, the lead shrinks from 8 to 6. Now, not a big deal.
There you go.
And Biden is at 49 in both polls, and Trump ticks up from 41 to 43 when you add Whitmer. So that doesn't mean if he picks Whitmer, it's a disaster. But the argument for Whitmer is you need Whitmer to win Michigan. Well, number one, you don't. He wins Michigan without her at this point.
Doesn't work anyway.
And
the whole concept of a running mate delivering a state is a very dubious concept.
I basically agree with that. There's no evidence in recent history that it works that way. And even if it could, I had a back and forth with a political scientist yesterday who made a legitimate point that there is some evidence that Kaine was a help to Clinton in Virginia, and Virginia was closer than you might have expected, and so maybe without Kaine, maybe she would have lost Virginia. I don't discount that. And there's some evidence that Pence was a marginal help in Indiana. Not that Indiana was a risk of losing, but he got a few more points they otherwise would have. But in those two cases, there was no attack campaign against those candidates in those respective states. The Trump team is already doing the treatment on Whitmer. Yes. They know she's a potential help.
Mike Murphy didn't really agree with me on this one, but I feel like it's working, and I see photos of her. This will be controversial, but I see photos of her that are not Breitbart. It'll be like Business Insider or something. You know what I mean? Like some just mainstream publication. And it's like there's something about the imagery or about the optics that bothers me and makes me believe that Trump could destroy her, could make her the issue. This is like very superficial, but I think he will find a way to zero in on her and make it about her, and that could cost them. So,
even if it doesn't actually ruin her, I mean, right now, her approval of Michigan is overall pretty good. It's in the 60s. There's no evidence that he would literally ruin his chances of making him lose. It's not that bad. But you would have in the rollout of Whitmer an enormous campaign to make her a polarizing figure, especially within Michigan, which negates whatever special quality she is alleged to have.
It also feels like, Biden has already said, I'm going to go with a woman.
Right.
Okay. So that's already happened. But then I'm going to go with the governor of Michigan that I wouldn't have considered a few months ago, but now it feels too forced and political. Amy and Kamala, say what you will about both of them. I'm sure they both got downsides, especially if you've worked for Amy, let's say.
Well, that's not an insignificant point. If there's stories out there, their shoes to drop, that's very relevant.
But they were on multiple debate stages. They've been, to a certain degree, vetted, just in the sense of can they be on. I think you got to go with one of those two. I just do.
Well, Biden has indicated that. He has said publicly the experience of running for president is relevant experience. I don't know what he exactly means by that, but I mean it the way I would say it the way you just said it. Being in the national spotlight, being on a debate stage, having gone through the gauntlet of interviews, having thought through all of these issues on the possibility that you might be the actual president, is not irrelevant to being able to hit that ground running. Because what you don't want is that first few days to be an unsteady, wobbly first few days. And you put a novice in there, it can be messy.
Yeah. No, look, I think if you were governor of New York or California or Florida for 8 years, that's different. But I feel like in this nationalized world, this media environment, being a senator and having run for president is better preparation for what you're going to need to do in this sprint than having been a governor of, a Midwestern state or something.
And the other downside for Whitmer is, you just don't know what Michigan's going to look like 3-6 months from now.
Or is it Great Lakes? I don't know what they call.
Yeah,
is Michigan a Great Lakes?
It's Great Lakes.
What would you call it?
It's a Great Lakes state. You don't know, and Michigan probably isn't going to be out of the woods. And so she can get attacked for abandoning her state, for political ambitions. That's also a big factor there. Now, I had my political rankings, my VP rankings last month. I put Kamala number 1, Klobuchar number 2. And so I'm basically making the Kamala argument. Now, I had a tweet.
Okay. I go Amy 1, Kamala 2.
I put Amy 2 for multiple reasons. Number 1, I think that signals a Midwest or bust strategy, which I don't think is the right geographic strategy. I think you want to spread the map. I think Biden can spread the map. He's already strong in the Midwest. I don't think that's where he needs the extra help. 2, I think there is evidence that younger voters, and I remind you, Biden does better with younger voters than he's given credit for, but is soft, and in that sort of youngish middle age area, it's even softer. There is evidence that younger voters Pew just had a poll about this. They asked, are you bothered that the nominee is a white male? And those numbers it's on 41% with Democrats in general. It's higher with younger voters. It was over 50 for 18 to 29. It was 45 for, in the 30-40 range. And it's higher with whites than with blacks and Latinos. It's guilty white people who are most bothered by this. So naming Kamala is not to juice the black vote. Maybe it does. But there are younger white voters who just don't like the idea. They might have voted for Biden or Bernie. They might have said, you know what, I really want to have a woman of color, but I just don't feel sure it's the electable thing to do, but I feel bad about it. And I'd feel less bad about it if the number 2 was a woman of color and that person would be queued up for 2024. So I think it's a sizable constituency that, and once you make that calculation, your plausible woman of color field is very limited, and Kamala tops that pack, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's take political considerations out of it, though, just for the sake of argument. Do you think one of those two is more prepared to govern / serve in the role of vice president versus the other?
I mean, you might give a nominal resume edge to Klobuchar, but it's not huge. I mean, she's been in the Senate longer, but they both have the law and order experience. Being AG of California is not an insignificant position. You have your fingers in a lot of pies there. And then Kamala's done the work on policy. I mean, and she put together a pretty broad policy suite. And she can speak very cogently on these subjects. I don't think she comes across like a newbie when she's on TV. And so I think she would be seen as credible enough. And there's less of a risk with Kamala of losing that Senate seat. I'm not saying you would definitely lose the seat in Minnesota. I think in Minnesota the governor can pick the replacement, but you have a special election soon enough. And it's a light blue state. Weird things can happen. We had Scott Brown, Massachusetts, so you can discount the possibility you can be surprised. It's one of the downsides for Tammy Baldwin, another Midwestern progressive. I think the governor does not appoint there, go straight to special election, and you could lose that. The Republican Party in California is pretty decimated, so I think the Democrats can keep a seat there. I mean, there's never been a strong Republican candidate for anything, and they have the top 2 system on top of that. I think the Republicans don't even get in the top 2 in a lot of Senate races there. So it's a much, much safer pick. And not being a governor, I mean, every governor is dealing with coronavirus right now. So to pull a governor out of coronavirus response is going to be tricky.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you saw yesterday, Kamala had a video where she takes Senator Mark Warner to task on his tuna melt recipe. Have you seen this?
I saw people saying things about Mark Warner and tuna melt, but I have no idea what the reference is.
So Mark Warner does an Instagram video where it's like a how-to to make a tuna melt, and it's like total cut rate tuna melt, where he dumps the tuna right out of the can, he squeezes on the mayonnaise, puts on a ton of mayonnaise, he puts on a layer of cheese, and he sticks it in the microwave.
And what's interesting here is Mark Warner used to be like a co-owner of a great restaurant in Alexandria, a formerly great restaurant called The Majestic. And I've seen Mark Warner at very nice restaurants. There's a place called Sfoglina downtown. It used to be called Casaluca in downtown D.C. So Mark Warner is like a restaurant guy. You know what I mean? He's like a foodie.
He's also super wealthy.
He's very rich. Yeah.
Telecom
money.
But he's being very down home and like, I'm just sticking my tuna melt in the microwave. He doesn't even like put on a skillet. It's in the microwave. And Kamala then tweets out, oh, honey, I need to show you how to make a tuna melt. And so she does an Instagram video with him where she does, I mean, it's not like a super fancy, I think it's a tuna salad sandwich, but she puts a little more effort. Yeah. She drains the tuna can. She uses Dijon mustard. She adds salt and pepper.
But he played along with this.
Well, he played along. But he's also kind of mocking her, like, oh, I guess that's how you do it in Northern California, What is that Grey Poupon mustard you have? And so I had a jokey tweet where I said, here's Veep Steaks, Gretchen Whitmer, we all need to fight coronavirus, Amy Klobuchar, we need to put politics aside and find common ground, Kamala Harris, America, you're doing your tuna melt wrong. And a bunch of Kamala fans got all mad at me, like, you're just disrespecting her. She's doing all this work and you're treating her like, I'm like, dude, I said she's number one. She's my number one VP pick. I'm making a joke.
Yeah.
But I think it's relevant.
It seems a little, yeah.
It's relevant how they're campaigning for the job. It's relevant she would choose this moment to do a video like that. And you can argue that it's good or bad, but she is trying to show, I mean, it was, for those who pay close attention to her, like, she is a good cook. She takes pride in her cooking. She did a food prep video with Mindy Kaling during the primary. She doesn't shy away that she has high-end food tastes and wants to be a good cook. So I would sort of lean towards it being a positive that she's being herself and showing her own personality, as opposed to, she's showing that she's some highfalutin, San Francisco person. Although you could make the counter argument.
Well, and speaking of which, I wanted to ask about Nancy Pelosi, another high-end San Francisco person. What's up with, I was behind the curve on this one. She did some video.
She was on one of the late night shows. I think it was Colbert.
But it seemed like, I felt like she was partly trying to be serious and talk about, like, the coronavirus, but then she was, like, showing off how much ice cream she has in her refrigerator. And, like, some people on the right are making this out to be, like, a big deal, like, that shows that she's out of touch and that, like, it's going to be used against Democrats in November.
I mean, I feel like, if you see the video, so she has she has like a giant freezer and a giant fridge. Obviously, the fact she has two separate things shows that she has.
And they're like stainless steel.
They're stainless steel, and she's showing that her freezer is entirely made of ice cream. It's obviously very indulgent to do that. And it was part of a conversation where I think they were talking about, how is she getting by and how chocolate's important to her. She always talks about how much she eats chocolate all the time, morning, noon, and night, and how her freezer's all full of chocolate ice cream. They've been running the hoity-toity San Francisco liberal play on Pelosi for over a decade, and it didn't work in the midterm. I don't see how.
But people weren't out of work. But there wasn't a 20% unemployment rate in the midterm.
She is not on the ballot in 2020 outside of San Francisco. You're not going to say, don't vote for Joe Biden because Nancy Pelosi has a fancy freezer. That's too many degrees. And not to mention, you're running against Donald Trump, who has like a gold-plated apartment. Granted,
that doesn't matter.
I know hypocrisy doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter. But Pelosi's not the nominee. So I just don't see how that is going to get you very far, and I don't see it having traction beyond the usual suspects on the right.
Was it tone deaf?
I think, as a general matter, be yourself, be a human. If chocolate ice cream is important to you, and you're a rich person who has a lot of chocolate ice cream, you show it off. People are seeing who you are. So what? It's when you seem phony they get into trouble. If John Kerry was like, yeah, I windsurf, so what? That might have been better than saying, well, I better go duck hunting now.
Right. Because then you're an elitist and a phony.
Yeah.
Instead of just being a rich dude. Own it, By the way, apropos of nothing, I just want to say this is the second time we've talked this week. We've been having these Zoom calls. How have you felt about them What's your take on these calls?
Well, and I think we're talking about this because you can join the Zoom calls if you become a Patreon supporter of one of us. So if you're like, oh, the Zoom call sounds interesting, there's a way to get on them, and that is by giving us money. But
just a little money, and it's not. You're not giving us money, Bill. You are supporting long form content. For example, you are going to be creating a podcast series that this is going to help support.
It's a history podcast. I was actually doing some recording this morning. So your money is helping me do that work in these lean times. I know it's hard for people to give money if they're financially strapped. I wouldn't say, go down to your last penny to give me money. But if you have extra disposable income, you want to throw me a few bucks, that is going to help me get this podcast off the ground. So yes, it is going to actual work, not just.
Yeah, but I feel like this has done two things for us. One, you and I are talking twice a week instead of once, which I like. But the other thing is, we have been meeting people who have been, in some cases, listening to this show, the DMZ, for a decade, and now we're basically, it's not face-to-face, but we're having a conversation with them. We're looking at them. They're looking at us. How's that experience been for you? I've really enjoyed it.
Well, I've been doing this over 10 years with you and with hosts before you, and I don't see metric.
We don't mention their name. This is like when George Costanza's dad, when they got Jerry Stiller to become George Costanza's dad. They went back and refilmed all the old episodes where George had a different dad, and they just airbrushed them all out. So we don't talk about your ex girlfriends.
Well, I don't see metrics. I have no idea how many people listen or watch or download or whatever. The comment threads, and I love our commenters. I'm not casting aspersions, but comments do attract the people who are angry with you more than the people who like you. So we see a lot of people in the comments who are coming from the far left and the far right. The far left, I'm a big sellout. Far right, you are a big sellout. And the people on the Zooms are people that actually like us and want to talk to us and ask us questions. And so that's nice, though, that those folks exist. And for folks who think, well, why should I do the Zooms because I have this? Well, it's not the same. We're having somewhat of a similar conversation, but we're having a conversation.
We had one guy from England.
That's right. We were more international.
A lady from Salt Lake City.
We had an expat who was in Eastern Europe last show. He's American, but he's living in Bulgaria. So we were more global than we realized. And I do think it's if you want that opportunity just to be part of a conversation with us, not that we're so special, but also our DMZ listeners, it's a great opportunity to do that, especially if you're looking for things to do at this time.
Yeah. And the good news is, I think we've had kind of the perfect number of people. Like we usually get like you and me and maybe 6 to 8 other people. So usually what happens is you and I will do our thing for like 20 minutes. Then one by one, I'll start bringing in people, usually in the order in which they join the call. And by the end of it, it's just a whole conversation and discussion. So
now,
it's been fun.
One topic that I brought up on the last Zoom, but I do want to bring up here for the broader audience. So I had a piece in Politico that came out on Sunday, which was a reported piece about how the pandemic is threatening the ballot access for the Green and Libertarian parties. And that's not, I mean, if it's a close race, it's not insignificant. In 2016, it was a close race. There was pretty robust third-party voting. I believe it was 6% overall, and that's not all Green and Libertarian. I think Green and Libertarian combined was between 4 and 5%. And there are states where the Green Party vote on its own was bigger than the margin of victory for Trump, and that's Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, at least. So some people think Jill Stein is why Trump got elected. Now you look at the exit poll data, it's a little more murky. You can probably say that more confidently about Michigan, when you look at, because they asked in the exit polls, who would you vote in a two-person race? So that sort of takes into account both Stein and Gary Johnson for the Libertarians and the other also-rans. And Pennsylvania and Wisconsin became dead heats, and Michigan became a Clinton win. So could it have mattered? Maybe. Can't know for sure. But not insignificant. I mean, both them being in the polls, and they were on most states. Libertarians were on all the states. Greens were on 44 states plus 3 with write-in status. So when you get to that level of access, you get mentioned in the polls. When you get mentioned in the polls, and you get poll numbers that are halfway decent, you get media coverage. And then the candidates, the major party candidates, have to think about, okay, what do I have to do to depress this vote and get those voters to come back? So it becomes a factor. Right now, the Libertarians are on 36 and the Greens 22 plus DC. Might be 23 for the Greens. Excuse me if I'm one off there. They're not going to get on. They're going to get mentioned in polls if it stays there. And this wouldn't be a bad number at this stage of the game in a normal year. But they need signatures to get on the remaining states, and they can't collect signatures now because of the pandemic. So
it's hard to. Usually, people don't like you coming up to them asking for signatures in the grocery store. During the pandemic.
So the battle terrain has shifted to, legislative, executive order, judicial, and will probably end up being a judicial matter in most places.
By the way, this is a great idea. I should go pretending to be for like Greenpeace or PETA and start approaching people asking for signatures. That could be very devious. Okay, anyway. Sorry.
Vermont legislatively has said signature requirements are waived. You can just be on the ballot. Illinois just had a court case where the judge is a federal district judge that said if you're on the ballot in 2016 or 2018, you can be on the ballot for that race again. For president, that gives Libertarians and Greens automatic placement. So they may win more cases like that. But most of the people I talked to who are electoral experts said probably going to be hit or miss, going to depend on the judge, depend on the state law. You don't know what the Supreme Court might do. Probably going to be patchwork, probably going to end up less states than before. But it's an uncertainty. Now, let's say... Now, mind you, neither party has nominated a candidate yet. The Greens are likely to nominate Howie Hawkins, who was a New York gubernatorial candidate before, longtime party activist. Libertarians more wide open, and you have Justin Amash, your favorite, who's been teasing the possibility that he will jump in the race. He hasn't done so yet, at least not at the time of us recording here. Does it become a factor for Amash for him to say, oh, Bill Scher Politico just wrote this article that says they may not be on 50 state ballots this time around. Do I want to sacrifice my House race when I don't know and can't know if I'm going to be on 50 states or close to 50 states this time around? Maybe it's not a factor for him.
Yeah.
But I don't, and he has to make a decision pretty soon. Now, the Libertarian Convention was supposed to be late May. They haven't changed it yet, but I was told that they probably will. So they don't know what the date will be, and they don't know how they're going to execute it. So that's a wild card. And so we don't know when he has to decide. Yeah. But
so first of all, let me just say, I've been wanting to say this for a decade. You say libertarian like libertarian. Have you noticed that?
I'm dropping the R.
Yeah. You don't say liber. You say libertarian.
Isn't that how they say it in the South? You drop your R's.
I don't know. Libertarian. I don't know where it comes from. I'm just, and maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? I don't really think I don't think Amash is really going to do this. I'm not convinced he could even win the Libertarian nomination. He didn't become so he certainly is a small L Libertarian ideologically, but in terms of being a capital L Libertarian, I mean he didn't leave the Republican Party to become a Libertarian. He became an independent, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what that means, but they have people who've been running for the Libertarian nomination for months. And the other thing is the Libertarian Party has, on a couple of occasions, kind of cast aside true believers in favor of going with former Republicans like Gary Johnson, for example, like Bill Weld. And it hasn't really worked for them.
Well, Gary Johnson did the best of any libertarian, I think, ever. So they have an argument to say, look, if you're trying to get the 5%, you get the 5%. You get FEC status, Federal Election Commission. You qualify for federal matching funds. Maybe some libertarians don't want federal matching funds, don't want government funds. But I think some do.
I think they do. I take it. Yeah. No, I think the other thing too is it's not just you said like if he can only get on 30 ballots, they're on 36 right now. Would it be worth sacrificing his congressional seat? And I say, if you're only going to get on 36 or 40 ballots, is it worth being tagged with playing spoiler? And so there was a piece in the Bulwark a couple days ago, like Sarah Longwell was one of the writers.
And Tim Miller, right?
Yeah. And the piece basically said, we love Justin Amash, but he should not run for president because of the spoiler issue. And look, here's the thing. If 6 months ago, because remember, Amash left the Republican Party on July 4th, 2019. So 3 months ago, if Amash had decided to run and started laying the groundwork for a presidential run, like back when I wanted him to do so, then that would have been like before Biden was the nominee or the presumptive nominee. That would have been when the Democrats had a big field. And you could say, like, look, let the chips fall where they may. But now I think we've sort of gotten used to the idea that this is a binary choice and it's Biden versus Trump. And so now for Amash to enter into that discussion and complicate matters, I think it's a little bit of a different animal than it would have been a few months ago.
Well, it depends what your overarching goal is. If your goal is defeat Trump at all cost, Justin Amash should not do that. If Justin Amash is saying, this is a libertarian moment, we have this moment where state governments are restricting our freedoms. This pandemic is not going to go away, and there's going to be more opportunities for authoritarianism. And this is an opportunity to grow the Libertarian Party and push back against this, because neither party is doing what they should be.
Amash hasn't taken a hard line. I mean, I haven't followed Amash that closely, but when I've seen him commenting on this, because he's in Michigan, so what he's been saying is we need to be responsible. However, I think Governor Whitmer has gone too far, saying you can't buy paint during a pandemic or you can't get a child safety seat or whatever. So he hasn't been, as far as I know, making a huge deal out of this. He's been saying, I think she went too far. So
he still might he still might conclude this is a chance to get the Libertarian Party over 5%, and you can get them over 5% and really fortify them as the third party, and that if he is the one who could get them over that finish line, then he is the leader of that party and can keep growing it going forward. I mean, if that's what his goal is.
But part of the problem with being a contrarian libertarian is they're not great at building movements. I mean, building a movement is like a communitarian sort of thing, and I think he's like. And don't get me wrong. Let me just reiterate. I will vote for Justin Amash for president if he's on my ballot. I will vote for him.
But not other libertarians.
I don't know. I don't know yet. I'd have to look into them. Whoever the nominee is, I'll look. I'm going to look into it. But I would vote for Amash if he was the nominee of the Libertarian Party. But having said that, I think he is essentially a contrarian. I think he is an introvert. And so I don't necessarily think he's about building a movement.
Well, this is arguably a challenge for any libertarian because they're not a communitarian operation. On the other hand, they do have the best third-party ballot access operation. They get in all 50. They have gotten all 50 ballots before. They've done it more than once. No other third party can say that. But to your other point, who had been the leading candidate, Jacob Hornberger, he has won the most primaries so far. He has been on a rampage, an anti-Amash rampage on his website, blog, and YouTube channel. He's up to 5 parts, 5-part video blog series, Why Justin Amash is Not a True Libertarian. Because there is this divide in the party between folks who are kind of excited about former Republicans coming in and giving them legitimacy and making it more possible to get on ballots and get media coverage and clear 5%, and those who are the purists. Hornberger is a Ron Paul disciple. And who thinks Justin Amash is, if he was so libertarian, why didn't he join the party before? Why could the Republicans have become an independent? And goes down the line all the various ways that he's inconsistent. So
you could have argued that Ron Paul. You could argue that Ron Paul wasn't a pure libertarian either, even though he did run.
Well, some do, but this guy Hornberger is a Ron Paul guy. Now, there's also Vermin Supreme, who has been a joke candidate for a very long time, but he actually has won 2 primaries. And he's actually running a bit more seriously than he has in the past, though he still wears the boot on his head in some appearances. There's a guy named Adam Kokesh, who's a super radical, who's running with John McAfee, the computer software guy, who's also kind of out to lunch. Now, a guy just jumped in the race last week named Jim Gray, who's a former judge, was Gary Johnson's VP in 2012, and openly calls himself a pragmatist and an incrementalist. So he was supporting Lincoln Chafee, who was the Republican senator turned independent governor, turned Democratic presidential candidate in 2016, and then became ran as libertarian, then packed it in. And so Jim Gray said, if Chafee's not going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Is he the guy whose big issue was the metric system?
That's right. So and when Gary Johnson won the nomination last time, it took him 2 ballots, because there was a faction of the party that thought him insufficiently libertarian. So that faction exists, and I don't know exactly who the delegates are this time. They're named at the various state conventions. They go to the convention unbound, although the candidates do try to get their people to become delegates. And if Amash is in there, he hasn't been involved in this process. And Jim Gray is not involved in this process, or hasn't been so far. So there are uncertainties whether he would get the nomination, although some people, like folks at Reason Magazine, think Amash would still have the inside track here. They're more Gary Johnson types than Jacob Hornberger, Ron Paul types. But we'll have to see. But Amash is...
You seem to know an inordinate amount about the Libertarian Party.
That's why I want to talk about this, because I've accumulated this knowledge and I want to share it. But I think Amash's decision is going to be based upon, does he want to lead this party for the long run? The only reason to do it, there's no point doing it to be one and done. I'm just going to be a spoiler and then go leave Congress and go get a job somewhere. There's no point in doing that. It only makes sense to do it if you're going to be the Libertarian Party leader for a long time.
Justin Amash is loaded.
Oh, is that right?
He's got a lot of money. He's got some money.
From where?
Parents. Which is a great way. I wish my parents were rich. I really do. So he's got money. I feel like if he wanted to build the Libertarian Party and build that party, then he would have already been doing it. So
build it his image. So this is my party now. You're going to do this the Amash way, and it'll be all my idiosyncrasies are your idiosyncrasies.
Hey, if it happens, maybe I'll become a libertarian. Bring it on. I'm sure I don't agree with him on everything, but the guy's got character and integrity, and that's a hell of a lot more than a lot of people have in these days.
He did miss a vote once. He was selfish. It was doing a TV interview, and he missed a House vote on the floor, and he has to live with that for the rest of his life.
He missed one vote. When he votes, he always writes. He does a Facebook post explaining why he voted a certain way. I admire him. I like him, and he's also read my book, Too Dumb to Fail, which let me just say, if you go to patreon.com/Matt Lewis, I think that's at the $10 tier. You get the autographed copy of Matt Lewis in the news, and you're invited on all of our Zoom calls.
Would you run on a Amash Lewis ticket?
Yes. If nominated, I will accept. If drafted, I will serve. I don't think that's going to happen, but I have by and large given up electoral politics. The dream of that to, once you decide to basically criticize everybody for a living and attack everybody in writing for a decade, you tend to burn some bridges along the way. So I think my electoral fortunes are not great. There's a huge paper trail and video trail of me saying outlandish things that would be used against me.
But it only all press is good press.
I mean, I just have to own it, as you've said. Don't hide from it. Just own it. I have 2 freezers and a hell of a lot of chocolate ice cream, and let the chips fall where they may.
We made some news today. Perhaps we should end it on that note.
All right, man. I had a guy on my podcast this week. Basically, I don't know if you knew this, Bill. There is online voting happening, and in West Virginia is one of the states where you could vote on the internet. They don't like to talk about it because they don't want you to think it's just online voting, because the way it works is, first of all, it's really ideally it's for people who are, say, like visually impaired. A lot of visually impaired people cannot read Braille. They couldn't vote through mail. If there's a pandemic, obviously they're not going to be going to the polls. And they may not have someone else who's coming in to help certify their vote. So they can sort of vote online by sort of like voice to text sort of thing. And it's not considered online voting because, according to the rules, somebody in the Secretary of State's office or the Department of Voting or whatever prints out a hard copy of it. That's what it is. But there is, so I just did a podcast about this with the guy who runs a company, the company who like does it in West Virginia, for example. And so I think this is going to be a trend toward online voting, and that may ultimately be good or bad. But if you've been wondering why nobody's talking about that, instead they're talking about mail-in voting, we get into some of that.
Very interesting. All right.
Yeah.
So check out my piece of Politico about the pandemic and third parties. Check out my Real Clear Politics piece about Joe Biden's polls. Is he troubled or is he Teflon? And we'll talk again next week.
All right. See you in the DMZ.